Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for EMBCA's Hellenism in Art from Both Sides of the Pond panel discussion. This event is in association with the American Hellenic Project at Queens College and a HEPA's Hellenic Cultural Commission. My name is Lou Katsos, EMBCA's president, and also the chairman of the HEPA's Hellenic Cultural Commission, and I will moderate this panel with Professor Nicholas Alexiou. He's not with us right now. He's in Greece, and we'll see if we can get him on board before we start. Our distinguished panel today will include Multi-Media Artist Agni Zotis, artist Electros Vekris, visual artist Dr. Nicholas Tsiaparas, author, visual artist Ioannis Stathoyiannis, architect, lecturer, artist John Fotiadis, and art historian, curator Anna Chassanakou. The program will include a musical presentation premiere by multifaceted musician, pianist, composer Spiro Cardamis. Hellenism has affected Hellenic artists in many different ways, whether they are in Hellas or in the diaspora in the US, both global innovative art centers. This panel discussion with artists, art historians, and curators will explore from both sides of the pond, in other words, the Atlantic, in Hellas and in the US, in particular from the New York Metropolitan area, and the effects of them and their particular aspects and thoughts on art and Hellenism. New York City and its metropolitan area has been and is a global hub of culture, and whose energy and vitality is powerfully evident in its art scene. Its contemporary art, and where many other influential styles and movements got their start, also affecting Hellenic American artists, has made a universal global impact on culture. Its art scene includes hundreds of art galleries, an amazing number of spaces and contemporary venues where art is exhibited, including public ones, and housed in dozens of the world's finest museums. Similarly, Hellas, having had an artistic legacy with DNA embedded from its foundation, it has come alive by an ever-growing and contemporary art scene. Like New York, for example, Athens has become a place among many other parts of Hellas, including Thessaloniki and others, offering favorable opportunities and havens for art fairs, festivals, and art events over the last few years. Although the recent COVID shutdown did affect the art scene tremendously on both sides of the pond, Hellenic artists with art ingrained in their bones on both sides are coming back with an explosion of energy, talent, and amazing works of art. For the East Mediterranean Business Cultural Alliance, which we know as EMBCA, this discussion with artists, art historians, and curators is important, not only as a contributor to Hellenic soft power, but also to culture, as well as business, since art is a business which affects many others. It has been proven that when an area is filled with artists, it attracts new studios and galleries, restaurants, and stimulates local economies in various ways. This energy is transmitted, stimulating economies in a variety of ways, and can change a less desirable neighborhood or city into a more and very desirable one, highly also affecting property values in a positive manner. This has been what has propelled, for example, many neighborhoods in New York in the past and present, whether it's in Chelsea, Tribeca, or in the outer borough areas, and is doing the same exact thing currently in Athens, Thessaloniki, and the center areas, which in some cases have fallen on bad times. As areas have heightened cultural activity, people with strong financial resources tend to become more interested and gravitate to it. And also, besides drawing wealth, it also draws workers, improves the area's job market, further boosting the economy, while also enriching culturally those attracted to the area. Join us today as we explore Hellenism in art from both sides of the pond, So what I'd like to do, though, is before we start our panel discussion, and we're going to introduce each panelist individually and then have our discussion, I would like to introduce our good friend, Spiro Cardamis, who will play a couple of original music pieces for us, being a great musical artist himself. He'll play one in the beginning and one at the end of the discussion. Spiro is a multifaceted musician, pianist, synthesizer, player, composer, arranger, producer. Spiro was born in Athens to a musical family. He studied classical piano with Eva Pana, a protege of the legendary French pianist Alfred Cortot, and theory and composition with distinguished Hellenic composer Ioannis Stathoyiannis. He holds an MM degree from Eastman School of Music, majoring in composition. Among his many awards, he has won a first prize from the Hellenic Ministry of Culture for chamber music and the first prize for best orchestration from the Thessaloniki Pop Music Festival, among many others. Spiro performs as both a band leader and a solo pianist and works on such diverse styles as classical, jazz, pop, new age, Hellenic, and Middle Eastern. His new age and world music, romantic, spiritual, mystical, and adventurous, has been performed throughout the United States, the Hellenic Republic, and Japan, and was featured in the documentary Greek Americans, which ran on WLIW. Among the recordings to his credit are his classical New Age albums of Mystical Places and Troubadours, Soothing to the Savage Beast, Homage 1989 to 2022, as well as his piano album, Piano and Soul. He is currently preparing his new album entitled My Hellenic Music. Welcome, Spiro, and thank you for coming with us today to play your original piece and a premiere.
Lou, thank you for inviting me. What a great synchronicity. This period, I've been focusing on creating and finishing my next album, which is My Hellenic Music. So I'm going to present a sample of that album. The first song is called Erotas, which means, in colloquial Greek, it means eros. And it's a result of my collaboration with, like, about 30 years ago with very talented and gifted poet, Greek American, Dino Makropoulos, who came
for the audience, the Hellenes have many words for love, and for the audience, many people, for the audience, Hellenes do not believe in one word for love. They believe in three words for love. You know, whether it's eros, philia, agape, etc. So he is playing eros. Eros, of course,
Erotas, yes,
is the erotic aspect of love. Thank you, Spiro, and let's go.
The first line of that poem goes, η ποίηση και η μουσική είναι έρωτας χωρίς ντροπή, which means poetry and music is love, eros, without shame. And when you hear this motif,
go, Spiro, go.
It is η ποίηση και η μουσική είναι.
Dr. Spiro, let's go. Come on, man.
You will hear it. I'm preparing you. Okay, I'm starting.
Okay. Spiro, that was magnificent. Spiro,
Thank you.
that was magnificent. Magnificent,
Thank
Spiro.
you.
Thank you so much, Spiro.
Synchronicity with the topic of our webinar. Thank you.
It's perfect. Thank you so much, Spiro. I have now the honor and pleasure of introducing our artists one by one. So, and then, of course, we're going to have our panel discussion. Our first artist is Agni Zotis. She's an internationally known multimedia artist with a lifelong focus on painting, including light installation, video, sound performance, and new media. She is known for her light-sensitive paintings which transform under varied light. She pioneered the concept of light as knowledge, and the way it is used changes how we perceive things to be. Her work explores individuality within universal consciousness, reflecting the relationship of the microcosm to the macrocosm. Her abstraction is organizing chaos, color, and form, capturing time and space through movement of energy. Her passion lives in the human condition, philosophy, quantum physics, science, exploration of the self. The esoteric quest started in childhood while visiting and immersing herself in the world of her Hellenic roots of mysticism, mythology, and ancient philosophy. The Socratic know thyself is part of her daily practice. She studied fine arts at Hunter College in the City University of New York with Roy de Cabara, photography, and Vincent Longa, etching. She apprenticed with a Byzantine iconographer monk in New York and a Buddhist monk in Pokhara, Nepal. And she studied the ancient techniques of painting, the use of pigments and symbols of mysticism, and modernized it into a contemporary feminine narrative. For decades, Agni immersed herself in art, religions, and cultures through global travels, including in Europe, Israel, Egypt, South America, and Nepal and India, where she learned movements of ancient knowledge, including the practice of yoga and meditation. New York City, India, and Greece are her grounds of inspiration. Her Agni Gallery hosted the avant-garde in the East Village, with many collaborations, including Agni painting, painting with Christian McBride, who played a bass, and since 2020, currently with Agnosian Gallery in Chelsea, New York. She is featured in 2 documentaries, Life Without Compromise and Art in the City. She exhibits globally, and her works are placed in international and public and private collections. Recently, she created the cover of the Hellenic Golden Directory of 2022. In addition, Agni founded in 2012 May Kids Transform Foundation, a youth and educators curriculum known as Creative Mindfulness, fostering self-awareness and emotional intelligence through meditation, art, and yoga. She is passionate about empowering people with creative mindfulness, the technique she developed, cultivating life as a beautiful masterpiece. The colors and forms being our thoughts, emotions, and actions. May Kids Transform has partnered with many creatives and educators globally since its founding. Well-being being a process in her work. In 2001, she was certified in breathwork, yoga, and meditation. And in 2006, from the art of living, and has been teaching ever since, besides her art, of course. In 2021, she was certified as a functional nutritionist. And in 2022, received a health coach certification with Body, Mind, Green, and BHWC program. She lives and works in Chelsea, New York. Thank you, Agni, for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you to you, Lou, for putting it together. And thank you to everybody coming together and exploring this very interesting subject. So so I have a massive collection of work, and what we're seeing now goes to this playing, right? Is what my work does. Which is basically using light to transform something that's already as it is, and the way we perceive things. And this, I see life as art, the whole thing, right? So although it's a creative aspect, we have creative aspects when we create an outcome of that looks like painting or many different things. I see the way we occupy our space in general is a form of art. So we'll start with the latest work, which this is I Am That I Am, the name of this painting. And it's part of my latest exhibitions that's right now in Chelsea, New York City. And the show itself it took 3 years to come together, and it was made during COVID, most of it. And it's called Silver Linings, and the basis of it is finding basically the good in the extremely not so good that we all felt on a global level. To me, that is coming back into the self, know thyself fundamentally, and really establishing in the self in the sense of wholeness. So, Costa, if you could just go through the images and this is like an installation shot. It's just one of the walls. I mean, there's many more, but I just chose this just for the sake of time. So this idea of like this individuality, universal consciousness, meaning of how we occupy space, right? This particular painting is called The Big Bang. And of course, it's this relationship of the universe to our own molecular structure, of how our own beings come together and are. At the same time, all these paintings, Silver Lining, this one is called There's a Universe in There. The next slide of it is Under Black Light, for example. And then things that I think about is how is life composed and what is life? I'm very curious about that. And I think that's the most Hellenic aspect of me, because I take philosophy is very ingrained in everything I do, ancient Greek philosophy in particular, and Socratean thought. And I see this idea of the matrix and interconnectivity in everything. And I think it's very obvious to everybody, especially after what we just went through. So also like this journey, this I chose because it's part of the Silver Lining, and it says love the process. So even though we don't love the process, we better love it in so many aspects. And it's a sort of odyssey of coming to the self and really dealing with what is home. And home to me is really the self. It's not a physicality, as in space out there, rather than right here. What is the self? Coming back into that being. This is part of a body of work that was called Step into the Light, and it was on Heraclitus' concept of you can't step into the same river twice, really meaning how everything changes, right? And that's something that we all have to deal with, this uncertainty, this constant uncertainty that kind of gives us a lot of neurosis and anxiety, because really it's only our memory and the way we fix ourselves in thought process. But everything changes, every single thing in the world, and it's constant movement and it's energy. And this is one piece of it, and it's called The Girls. This is on with black light. The next one is going into, this is from a body of work that's called Be Nice. And the whole concept of being nice is based on Plato's Republic, and especially on the scene being in the cave and coming out into the light and seeing the light, and when the shadows dissipate, and really seeing the truth and going back and telling the friends, and nobody's believing the thing you're mad, right? So this particular piece is about the heart and love. Especially the feminine. There's many paintings, of course, this series. I chose this one because I think that is our biggest, as humanity, is our biggest power, is our love. And everything in this consciousness is about love, coming together and, of course, falling apart. So this is part of that exhibition, just an installation shot to get, like, these paintings are 6 feet tall, most of them, but, you know, just an installation shot of that show. So this is the city. And this is about the inner fires, this series. And it's about our inner power and energy and how it moves and how it's collective. And although it's a landscape, and I thought of New York City when I was making it, I also thought of how us as individuals collect upon our bodies through memories, all these experiences, and they all become part of our narrative of who we are and how we explore and experience life. Next slide. Yeah, so it's the same image in a different light, which I always love to do and play. So as we're looking at these, keep in mind that every single painting changes on the varied life, and I've been doing this for 25 years. This piece's simplicity is complex. Part of a body of work that I really was looking to transfer from figurative work. Even before that, it started to happen. But this idea of how we complicate things and how the intellect really does that, and that's fine, that's our nature. But in reality, life is quite simple, and that's something that I like to keep in mind and keep things simple and to the point. So this is, it's called Embryo, this particular piece. And it's what we cultivate and through our intentions and being. Next piece, safe. So this is like an equation piece. Also, these are quite large, all of these pieces, and this was a piece that was on this idea of how to feel safe, basically, right? And how at the bottom of it, it's an equation, and there's all these different systems in it where it says, I never feel safe. And then I went on a trip, and when I came back, it said, I always feel safe. And really the idea is, on my quest for happiness, I keep on missing it, basically because it's right in front of us the whole time. And all we have to do is just basically tune into it. And infinity equals the square root of completion. I mean, that's like the green in there. And once, there's a whole bunch of little equations in there that I find were very relevant at the time for happiness and being. So this piece is called Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places, part of a series that was called Exploration of Love. And like I said before, my work used to be figurative for many years, and I did struggle with becoming abstract and taking out the figure. And the more I got into meditation, because I've been into meditation and this quest of know thyself my whole life, basically. And the more I got into that space, the more I could see the relationship of molecular structure and the whole out there and the continuum. So here it's like consuming the lava, basically. And it's like a flower, but it's one of those flowers that eats. Yeah. So this is an installation shot of with a couple of different pieces, because I am, although we're showing paintings here for the sake of time, but I do sculptures and many other things. This is an installation shot from a gallery space, and it has, I call this particular piece, it was Bridging Time. These pieces were influenced through my travels in India and spending a lot of time out there. In Egypt, and just really studying and looking at nature and Buddhism and Hinduism and symbolisms of the golden ratio and different stuff. But having these experiences of what is physicality and what is the metaphysics, because I think the metaphysics inform the physical. Although everything seems physical in this reality, it's really, in my mind, the other way around. Yeah, so this is me in my studio. I think it's a 25-year-old photograph. So this is work that I used to do. The piece is not completed, but just for scale, to understand how big these pieces are. I spent time in Egypt and studied Egyptology and saw the connections of ancient Greeks and Egypt, ancient Egypt. And I was quite fascinated on the relationships and also what all these different cultures had to say about life and death. Because I've always, and I'm very curious about it, although I'm not confused about it anymore. There's a great acceptance within me of what life is. But I used to be very, very curious, and still am, of what are we doing here? And how we come to be, and what is reality really, and how is reality created, and how, and basically that is through our own personal perspective. And the last shot, the last image, is the gift. And part of this series that's Journeys Through Time, it's also a quite large painting. And this body of work, I traveled for about 3 years by myself, really looking at cultures, religions, studying life, death, how different from Muslims, Jews, Hindus, Buddhists, among some, just to name some of them. Look at what is death, what is life, and even afterlife. And the thing that I really understand, and I have ingrained myself in, is that life is a gift. And this is what I'm leaving you with, is that life is so precious. And once we start really looking at this, it's quite fascinating. And I also like incorporating, bringing the divine in this body of work, Journeys Through Time, now keep in mind, this is 25 years ago, this work, is how these archetypes really define our lives. And although they're out there as images, they're fantastic. That's fantastic, and that's great for whatever belief system one has. But incorporating those into our reality and really taking this as a gift and using the most beautiful archetypes that are aligned with us, I think it's the gift and it's the secret to a good life. So with that, I conclude, and thank you so much.
Agni, thank you for joining us today. It was a great presentation of the body of your work. Our next artist is a visual artist, Dr. Nikos Tsiaparas. He was born in Veria, a small town very close to Vergina, where Alexander the Great lived, and studied in the Fine Arts School of Aristotelian University in Thessaloniki. His postgraduate studies in fine arts were at Goldsmiths College, University of London, in 1996, and he continued in Middlesex University for the degrees of postgraduate diploma and master's in fine arts with a scholarship from Alexander S. Onassis Public Benefit Foundation. In 2016, he completed his PhD in fine arts, and the research title was Picturing the Child from Photographic Images to Painting. Nikos's works have exhibited in 10 solo shows, and he represented Hellas in 2 biennial for young artists in Rome and in Reka, as well as in several group exhibitions. Currently, he is exhibiting 3 artworks in a group show at the Mystic Museum in Athens, which I think was the former home of Schliemann, if I'm not mistaken, for the 200th anniversary of the Hellenic Revolution. And he also has a solo exhibition entitled Nostos, a collaboration of the Numismatic Museum with the municipality of Veria. 20 artworks inspired by medals that were crafted just after the revolution, the Hellenic Revolution of 1821. His artworks are in major Hellenic and international art collections. And Nico has worked for 18 years as an art teacher in secondary schools, and from 2021 became an art professor in the Fine Arts School of the Aristotelian University as a reader. Welcome, Nico, and thank you for being with us today.
Welcome, and hello to everyone in the panel. I've prepared a presentation of my work, of my artworks. In the PowerPoint that we are going to see, the first part is about my previous circle of works about the child, and I'm going to read some notes from my research about this period of my paintings. And in the end, we will see some of my newest pieces about this exhibition in the Numismatic Museum in Athens, and this solo show Nostos about the nostalgia of my hometown combined with this 200 years from the Greek Revolution. This is one of my earliest paintings in this circle of works about the child. In the first 4 or 5 slides, we will see paintings that they have to say a little story. They have always background. The child is playing a role, and after that, we'll see big faces that are about a meter or so, so that they are very powerful to the viewer. They are very dominant. So I'm going to read some of my thoughts about these paintings. My paintings are in the strictest sense representational, and the subject matter is the child and childhood seen as the site around which certain psychological and social preconceptions are played out. This might be broadly stated as the child and child's consciousness of self and other versus the adult consciousness of child, the assumption of innocence as it is understood or it is constructed by knowledgeable, sexually oriented adult. In the context of my paintings, this can be crudely divided between child as subject and the painter's, therefore the viewer's gaze. In this respect, it links to a wide range of references derived from the post-war art history and popular culture. It re-engages with some of the stylistic strokes of pop, but very much after the theorizing of the image, which occurred in the last 10 or 15 years as part of the wider debate around representation. In this respect, my paintings that are always being constructed by my photographs depend as much upon the applied rhetoric of pulp culture, lifestyle magazine, commercial photography, etc., as they do upon the specifics of contemporary art practice. They also end up using many different language forms, from the cliché exaggerations and stereotypes of the cartoon to the most exciting forms and manners of representational paintings. At a deeper sense, my paintings are engaged with memory, and it is this element that secures them against the charge of an untrammeled voyeurism, as well as looking at the childhood as it is lived by the younger members of my family. I have to say that most of my models were my two nieces. I'm seeking to recover some sense of my own childhood at one removed, as a process of introjections as part of the adult collective consciousness. In my artworks, childhood is not meant merely as an age, but as an allegorical state, drawing upon its conceptualizations of youth and adolescence through a wide range of philosophers, sociologists, and psychoanalysts. In my paintings, under examination here, a wide variety of child images become the sites to explore gender in flux. It is an unstable exploration that grows more complicated as a result of new childhood stereotypes. New social trends make children far more sophisticated than their predecessors. These include increased responsibility by children, higher levels of exposure to adult media, greater facility with new technology, earlier puberty, and increased awareness at an earlier age. In an era of technological revolution, regardless of the infinite possibilities offered, we acquire information by standing in front of a window, a screen, just like we do in front of paintings. My painting certainly is not a matter of the representation of a realistic space, but the creation of a neutral stage pictorial space where living and interactive relationships develop between the viewer and the world of adolescence. My images surpass the realism of the representation of the human face or body and touch in an elusive way the irony, the mockery, the kitsch, and mainly the connotation of the illusionistic games of an underlying eroticism. The apparent innocence of these attractive young girls and boys, these colorful lolitas, shock and provoke tenderly and gently. Everything is implied through ambiguous, explicit gestural codes. These colorful, sorry for this interruption, but
Did we lose Nico or no?
Yeah, it seems so. Yeah, he's not online.
Okay. So, maybe I should just continue and we'll go back to Nico when we get him.
He's back. He's back.
He's back? Okay, good. Okay.
excuse me for this, but they called me at the phone.
No problem, Nico. It's fantastic. It's fantastic, everything you're doing. Please continue.
These colorful incarnated beings that were constructed from photographic resources live their carefree existence through natural tendencies and expressions, thereby determining their surroundings, while with their inner mystery they provoke the viewer's reactions with their gaze. My children pose. Please, we can stop at this slide, because this is a different part of my work. It's about my latest project. So I have to conclude. In the latter part of the 20th century, we have passed sociologically and representationally from an innocent child to a knowing child, expressing the dominance of mass media production and that transforms romantic notions of childhood innocence into something more sophisticated, more explanatory, and nearly adult. Over the years, the practice of my art had a conversation with the image of the child, a dialogue with which did not only stand for as a repetition of characters, imaginary or not, but it also operated as staging the younger self that sometimes blurred the boundaries of portraiture and self-portraiture. I think that developing and sharing knowledge about the complicated processes of making art must inevitably lead to a more enlightened grasp, understanding, and encouragement of the artist in contemporary society. A more effective articulation of practice can enable the subsequent relationship between artist, artwork, and viewer to become closer. The analysis of tacit and often hidden art-making processes and meanings should help to develop a more informed viewer. The question for us as art practitioners is not about the worth of or value of articulating our practice, but to consider how we can achieve an ever increasing clarity of utterance. So after this first part of my artworks, I would like to show you some of my latest pieces. That it was a collaboration with the Numismatic Museum in Athens, and as Lou said, it's also Slima's house is a perfect building, and I had the opportunity to have these treasures and to use them. These were 12 medals that the King Othon crafted for his marriage, with the reason of his marriage. And through these medals, we see real faces of the revolution, because the craftsman that produced them has the opportunity to see all these heroes alive. If we can pass one or two, another one. Yes, from this one on. These are my latest pieces. They are watercolor pencils on paper or acrylics on paper and on canvas. And I think it was a very difficult challenge for me, because usually in Greece we see faces of this era, these heroes, in a very cliched or in a very kitsch way, through some lithographs of these ages in our schools, in our municipalities, generally in this kind of places. So I tried to reach them and to reach the history of these medals with a very contemporary way and very personal way. As I said, some of them are made on paper and some of them are on canvas. And the biggest one is the last one, is Kolokotronis and Nikitaras. This is one. It's a very big acrylic painting And the last one shows the medals and their as it is exhibited. It is still exhibited in Numismatic Museum in Athens. So you can make a comparison of the inspiration in inverted commas and the result.
Nico, thank you so much for that. You're where now, in Thessaloniki? Where are you?
Now I'm in Veria, in my mother's home, because we have a better internet connection. To be honest.
No, that's fantastic for the audience. Okay, the Numismatic Museum in Athens. Not too many people know about it, but it's one of the finest museums, that relates to coins, quite frankly. And as was indicated, it was Schliemann's house. It was his mansion. It's a beautiful venue to go to if you're in Athens. It's absolutely spectacular. And you did mention, of course, Othon. For those in the audience who don't know who Othon was, he was the first king of the Hellenes during the post-Hellenic Revolution period. And there was also a reference in terms of the way the images, as Nico said, that used to be out there, idealizing some of the people that we're talking about. A lot of them, of course, were by European artists, including Hess, who had some very important works that he did. Nico, thank you again for joining us today. Thank you. Our next artist and panelist is author visual artist Ioannis Stathoyiannis. He was born in Athens and studied in Great Britain. There he gained a BA honors degree in fine arts, time-based media and digital art, and a master's in arts and design in animation. He received a teaching degree for arts from Athens College for Fine Arts. And Yanni has taught as a lecturer in the visual communication department at the Raffles Education Corporation, Singapore Institute in China, Canton. His writings and works focuses on gathering, recording, and reviving Hellenic and Chinese myths. His first bilingual book, entitled Cultural Traveling Between Greece and China, was published in China in 2007 and received numerous significant distinctions and awards. And in 2010, it was translated into the Hellenic. In 2014, he had the inspiration to create the Stathoyiannis zoo of 200 experimental art pillows and 15 collections. The presentation of this project became, in 2021, a controversial solo exhibition with the title Stathoyiannis Collection, Narratives and Dialogues, 21 + 8 artists, transforming a Cretan hotel into a living contemporary art space. The basic idea of this exhibition was the artistic dialogue between the art pillows and the original works of the participating artists. Yanni has collaborated with noteworthy corporations active in the field of art and culture, advertising, communication, and fashion. He has worked on studies for University Research Institute of Mental Health, the Army Geographical Services, and several Hellenic municipalities. He has implemented educational programs for children, studies and proposals for digital technology and animation and visual reality, and in the Hellenic Republic and also abroad. He has been an active member of the Art Chamber of the Hellenic Republic, the Hellenic Chinese Chamber of Commerce of the Hellenic Republic, the Union of Graphic Artists of Hellas, the Association Friends of Mycenae and Mycenaean Culture. And currently, Yanni is working for the Hellenic Ministry of Education as an art teacher in public schools, and currently a PhD candidate in the Department of Cultural Technology and Communications of the Aegean University. Welcome, Yanni, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for this kind presentation. And today I will talk, I give it a title, The Quest, because my life is full of journeys and quests. So I will go through a small presentation. I will share my screen, and it should be there, right? Can you see?
Yes, yes.
Okay, let me just probably there we are. Okay, Agapiti, dear ladies and gentlemen, my life has been separated between countries. Cultures from West and East influenced my artwork. As a traveler of emotions, full of ambition, and as a believer of a united world, seeking for a better career, my first step of my life journey led me to the northern part of China as a lecturer to Visual Communication Department in Raffles Education Corporation. Living in a foreign country is not an easy thing, especially teaching, as I did in the field of art and design, as you have to surpass your frontiers and try to adopt a new way of thinking, at least for me, that sometimes you adopt or reject. The beginning, the motive power of everything is the observation and the interest of the love of creation. All of a sudden, I found that meander pattern, the Greek key, a purely Greek symbol, as I thought at first, over in Guangzhou city, but after looking more carefully, I discovered more. I could see it more often, hidden in different parts of the city. I was amazed. I was seeking for an answer. The meander, which I met both in Greece and China, a sharing symbol, gave me the idea of the writing of a book which reinforces and builds a bridge of the culture bilateral relations. The sole aim of this book is to outline the mythology, the heroes, the cultural heritage, both countries, and aspiringly offer the readers one more reason to get closer and understand each other. The book demonstrates distinguished myths and legends, as well as historical events, figures, and rituals in both nature, but is not stopping there. It's trying to find similarities and links among them. The book is written in English, Greek, and Chinese, hoping to be translated in more languages for the good of the future. Returning to Greece, I missed my travels, my experiences, and the cultures. On the quest to fulfill the gap of nostalgia, I came across the idea of capturing my life into a pillow. Therefore, I created the collection Stathoyiannis Eyes and Zoo, a collection of 200 experiential pillows. And my last one, my dream pillow, including in the future and the connection with the technology. A pillow like hope that lights by itself, a firefly with a symbol of Taurus, the minute. During the pandemic, I wanted again to be the optimistic and energetic person I always were. So I wanted my solo exhibition to be presented to the audience with the collaboration of the 200 years Greek independence. In my mind, I wanted to celebrate art, life, and the joy of communication and travel. I was really scared at the time, but I trust my instinct, the Greek summer, and my organization skills. Therefore, in June 2021, I present my controversial solo exhibition with the title Stathoyiannis Collections, Narration and Dialogue. 21 plus 8 artists, transforming a Cretan hotel into a living contemporary art space. The basic idea of this exhibition was the artistic dialogue between the art pillows and the original works of the 29 participating artists from all Greece in 4 thematic units. First, place and presence, inspired by travel. Second, abstraction and figurative conjecture, inspired by Cretan mythology and nature. Third, emotions, inspired by color as feeling and emotion. Fourth, meet the artist related to the negotiation of concept and the expression of existential reflections and social concern, and live or die with a theme inspired by current events. What's next for them? I have in mind to exhibit my artwork abroad into a wall synthesis of 200 pillows in an art space, a colorful patchwork of life, emotions, storytelling, and 6 blank pillows created with 3D print, letting the audience expressing their life or feelings for the future. I do desire to have a presence in the United States as an artist. Besides that, as a dreamer and as an art teacher in public schools, I'm preparing a project that I'm seeking for funding, giving the chance to Greek students to experiment and create hybrid art, combination of art and technology, into an exhibition that will bring together students from diaspora in an artistic dialogue based on hybrid art. Being an art teacher for many years, I wished for an academic career and fulfill my quest to mix art and travel aspects. As the ancient philosopher Lao Tzu said, a journey of 1,000 kilometers begins with a single step. In March 2021, I started this long travel with all these elements analyzed, the multifaceted personality of Monkey King, Zhang Wugong, in the University of the Aegean and the Department of Cultural Technology and Communication, a unique character from the Chinese novel Journey to the West, written by Wu Cheng'e, the 16th century. Monkey King is a major religion and mythological figure in China. Approaching this cultural issue, we encounter emerging features of modern Chinese culture that have their roots in the distant past. Analyzing the influences and sources of the symbol's origin, as well as images that constitute its most widespread form, dynamics of the image is how this myth was constructed is examined. Possibly influences regarding the process of the birth, evolution, and contemporary reception of the Monkey King through manga and anime, as well as its presentation in the modern world of technology and audiovisual media are also examined. Finally, intensively as regard to the research in contribution to the creation of all the cultural creation of bonding between China and Greece. Having reached the second year of my research, I can announce very little for the very first time in this panel. I can mention disposable Western and Christianity influences over Nestorianism that may have occurred in the area of Dongguan City in northwestern Gansu province, Western China, around the 7th century. Over the blending of culture and religion in China, open states policy between the Sui Tang dynasties, 6th to 8th century, allowed this new concept of religion that they have been born and popularized in Western Asia to enter and develop coexisting with China dominant religion, Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. Rongjing Yang, page 331-32. This might have influenced Chinese artists in early model imaging of Monkey King in the area of Dongguan Caves, Mongao, and other representation of Monkey King with the style of the Buddhist art that they have existing over the centuries that influenced the writer to write Journey to the West and the unique character of Monkey King, Zhang Wugong. Thank you very much. Pause. How do I to delete that? There I am. I finished my presentation.
We seem to be a panel without a host.
So I suppose then it has to be the next presentation, the presenter.
Yeah, I don't know where Lou went, but
Give me a second. Yeah, Lou has been disconnected, it seems. So,
Do you have to go through everything?
So,
Costa, what would you like us to do?
John, you should be the next one in line.
I'm the next. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Do you mind if I do a screen share?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Great. Let's see. Where is my? I have to find it. Just give me 1 sec.
I have a question because they've been telling me that they didn't go through my presentation. Did you see the slides?
We saw the first page. I did not see the slides moving.
Costa, would you mind to go through, like a little bit my presentation till John will
Yeah,
go?
sure.
Yeah.
Give me a second.
Right. So this is the book that I was mentioning, The Cultural Travel in Greece and China, in Chinese and Greek. And this is, like some of the illustrations that I did, like with the Greek gods and Chinese gods. And this is the Stathoyiannis collection, the pillows that we're going to see here. That is, through, like all the memories that I have from my travels or emotions and different things. And this is a fiber optic pillow that I was mentioning before, the dream pillow. And the exhibition that held in Crete, the talk of the 21+8 artists, picking up a pillow and having the discussion. And then we keep going, with my later research of my PhD about San Wukong, Monkey King.
Sorry to interrupt you. Ilya just called and asked Costa to send him a link. He got knocked off and he needs a link to get on. So Costa,
Okay, give me.
sorry to interrupt.
Fine. And that's my title, Cultural Continuity and Discontinuity in Traditional and Modern Design and Animation, the case of Monkey King as a cultural expression in China. And the characteristics, I made a CV about San Wukong. It's from the Journey to the West of Wu Cheng'en, the 16th century, He's born from a stone mountain, Huaguo, Jiangsu, China. His address is Flowers and Fruits Mountain, the country outline, mythical, country. The ability is immortal, he can transform 72 times with powers, superhuman durability. He was in prison and for 400 years, and he's been rebelled by Guayin. And his mission to become a discipline and accompany the monk Huangshan with other two disciplines from the West, where Buddha and his followers reside, having acquired. Next one, please. And this is the Dongguan, the caves Mongao, 1,000 caves of Buddha that actually we have in the next one, please, which is the mural that I was referring, that it seems that's a blending of culture, and most likely the artists have influences from Christianity and historianism. And my bibliography. Thank you.
Shall we wait for Lou to come back
Yeah,
on?
yes, he's waiting to get on. Just send him a link.
I need to call him for him to log in. So if you can go on, John, that would be great with your presentation.
Sure. Let me see if I can do a screen share. Oh, there he is. I see Lou. He's coming on. There he is. There he was.
There he is.
We can't hear you, Lou.
Ilya.
We can't hear you. Lou seems muted.
Hello.
Unmute. There you are.
Sorry about that. Yanni, unfortunately, your sister called me right in the middle of your presentation, and completely knocked me off this, the scenario. So I didn't get to hear, unfortunately, a bit of your presentation.
Doesn't
But I will
matter.
say,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's okay since we have it recorded, so someone can refer it later on.
No, it's not okay for me. Nothing personal, but it's not okay for me. But that's okay. I will mention that what you're doing is fantastic. I indicated to you earlier that one of the most famous Hellenic, American, and Japanese authors was actually Lefkadio Hearn, who did similar work in Japan. And you're to be commended for the work that you're doing with regards to China. With that, I'd like to introduce properly John Fotiadis. John Fotiadis, of course, is known to many of us. He was one of the founders with myself of EMBCA. John Ioannis Fotiadis has been a licensed architect in the United States for over 25 years and has worked in the profession of architecture for over 30. Over the course of his career, Yanni has produced architectural design services to top real estate development companies, both nationally and internationally. In addition to designing buildings, Yanni is a multifaceted and recognized artist and musician. He has also dabbled in film, comedy, and has an extensive interest in history and philosophy. His work as an architect has taken him to cities as varied as Doha, Seoul, Dhaka, San Francisco, Cairo, Moscow, Panama, Kyiv, and we can go on and on.
It goes on and on.
And he likes to say that, quote, "I've been blessed with a unique education that one is afforded only through travel. As Socrates, my intellectual hero, said via Plutarch, I am not an Athenian or a Hellene, but a citizen of the world." Yanni has started drawing as a young child and developed a love of visual art from an early age. His artwork has explored various themes and techniques, but has always been primarily inspired by the imagery of his early childhood years, which he spent extensive and extended summers in Hellas. In recent years, Anya's trips to the Hellenic Republic have focused on his immersion in classical antiquity. What has resulted is an open-ended drawing project started in 2019 called The Solace of Antiquity. The drawings in this project, done in graphite, colored pencil, and charcoal, document the ruins of ancient sites and explore the effects of the luminous Aegean light in the architectural remnants there. Equally informed by philosophy and academic drawing techniques rooted in optical theory, what Yanni's drawings reveal is a unique and visceral metaphysical character of these ancient places that transcends space and time. Yanni presently provides independent consulting services and is most recently taught in a series of architectural design studios in the Westphal College of Media Arts and Design at Drexel University in Philadelphia. Yanni, welcome as always, and thank you for being there. Thank you for getting me back on board to introduce you properly. Thank you, Yanni.
Well, it's great to be here, Lou. Thank you again for always thinking of me and considering my inclusion in these very interesting discussions. Today is particularly interesting because I see I'm amongst accomplished and seasoned artists. So it's a real honor to be part of the panel. And what I find really interesting in terms of what I've heard so far is that we all are extremely influenced and shaped by our cultural legacy. And what I find fascinating is that a lot of that legacy harkens back to antiquity. You know, when Agni was giving her presentation earlier, she talked a lot about philosophy, Heraclitus, and you know, I've had very, very similar revelations, going through this process of basically transitioning from an architect into an artist, I found more inspiration from the philosophy of antiquity than I did from any drawing course or study of fine art that I've done. So, and hopefully that some of the images that I'll show you reflects that. So I think I can go ahead and do a screen share, if that's okay. Let's see, can everybody see the screen? Yes, okay. So what I'm going to show you is a number of drawings that come from the Solace of Antiquity collection. I also would like to mention that right now, a lot of these drawings are on exhibit as we speak at the College of Southern Nevada in Las Vegas as part of a one-man show there called Metaphysical Greece. And that word metaphysical is a very heavy word. It's very loaded. So anyway, let me take you through some of these. This is an Anthemion from the Roman Agora in Athens. It's a Prismacolor pencil on gray tone paper. And I spent a lot of time in Athens. This is a result of a very long trip that I took there in the summer of 2019, doing extensive field sketching amongst ancient sites like the Roman Agora, the Athenian Agora, Cape Sunion, the Acropolis, of course. And it's fair to say that I basically had to unteach myself how to draw like an architect, which is how I learned to draw, and really to learn to draw in a way that I found was much more revelatory, because I was trying to get to kind of the truth behind all of this. And that really comes from this philosophical immersion, particularly Plato, Neoplatonism, and this idea of the realm that we inhabit and the world that we perceive. And then there's this other world, this world of ideal forms, of idealized ideas that we may occasionally get glimpses of, some moments of particular insight. But that world is really hard to penetrate, given all of the distractions and the bombardment of information that we experience on a day-to-day basis. So these drawings for me were a way of trying to get to that more profound truth. And this particular image, it also speaks about ephemeral beauty, the ideas of permanence and impermanence, and how you have this 2,000-year-old hunk of stone which was carved into this grave steel, and you have this ivy plant that is growing and vibrant next to it. And really the shadows that result from one object casting a shadow on the other becomes the synthesis of the whole thing, and really kind of the key to understanding these two worlds. This is from the same series. For those of you that know Athens, you probably know what this is. This is a view of Mount Lykavitos between the temples, the columns of the Temple of Olympian Zeus, which is an amazing building. There's not much of it left today, but it was once the largest temple in antiquity, completed by the Emperor Hadrian. Again, Prismacolor on gray tone paper. Here is the guy who completed that building, and this was a drawing from the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. And again, this idea of these figures, these historical people that occupied a reality at some point in time, and all we have left now are just kind of fragments and clues. And I think a lot of my art is about trying to piece together those fragments to understand a narrative of a reality that occurred long ago, but might be a reality that's much closer to the truth than the one that we may inhabit. This is the same drawing that's behind me. This is a view of the Propylaea, the base of the Propylaea of the Acropolis, looking up. Before you enter the realm of the gods, before you enter the Temenos of Athena, you are still in this secular world of human beings. So this is one of the most beautiful gateways I've ever gone through in my life. and I wanted to kind of represent it that way. The northeast face of the Tower of the Winds in the Roman Agora, light, shadow. What I really liked about this image and what I found somewhat whimsical about it is the fact that you have this, what some people argue was the world's first meteorological station in the Roman Agora of Athens, this 8-sided little quirky little building, and each side, each facet represents one of the winds. And this happens to be the northeast wind, a character named Kaikias, and he's represented as an old man holding a shield full of hailstones. And I thought that was such a funny idea that I just had to draw him. And of course, there's something very kind of poignant about, you know, the way the light is kind of raking along this figure that's so weathered and so old, and part of another world and another reality. More recently, I went into the mundane and the banal world that one also sees in Greece, but it's just as magical as the world of antiquity because it's all illuminated by this incredible light of the Aegean. And I spent a lot of time in the summer near Cape Sunium. There's a port city called Lavrion. Some of you might be familiar with it. And there are a series of cast iron rings that sit along the piers. And each one of them is a little beautiful composition of light, shadow, chains, ropes, and these rings that seem omnipresent. And it was in these field sketches that I did a few years ago where I began to realize that, you know, the more you look, the more you see. And there are tiny little worlds right in front of you that are absolutely wondrous and miraculous, these plays of light and shadow. And so I decided to do a series of these rings, and I literally just walked around the port of Lavrion. I'm sure the locals there thought I was a bit crazy. But you see, these are some of the images, really vibrant, and you just feel the luminosity and the composition, you know, the concrete, the water, the ropes. All of these, by the way, are graphite on paper, and they're quite large, I would say 2 by 3 feet. A bollard, which has a composition of ropes here to the left that have this very kind of sinewy, snake-like quality. So there's a little bit of a mythological image that's going on. But you can see that most of this work, I guess you could categorize it as representational, hyper-realistic. It's the world that I come from, having studied architecture and learned to use drawing as a tool to analyze and to understand forms. But I would say it's fair to say at this point in my life and career, I'm kind of using that tool to also try and use it more as a revelatory tool to understand existence and truth and meaning. And these drawings certainly have helped me to do that. There's this very interesting character from antiquity named Antinous. I'm sure the people that have read their history know that he was the Emperor Hadrian's lover, this young Bithynian youth. And the reason I decided to draw him is because everywhere I've gone in the Mediterranean, whether it's in Italy or Greece or Turkey or other parts, you will find statues of Antinous everywhere. More than any general or more than any philosopher from antiquity, it seems that he's omnipresent. And the reason being that when he died rather mysteriously on the Nile, I think it was in the mid-1st century, the Emperor Hadrian, a big Philhellene, was so bereaved, so fraught with grief, that he deified Antinous and he decided to make him a god, and demanded that his statue be carved everywhere. And what I found so poignant about the story is that this is just such a vain attempt at trying to preserve beauty, which by its very nature is ephemeral, but trying to preserve it in this cold, dead material of stone. So Antinous has survived. I mean, to a degree, he's become immortal. I mean, we have his image, but he's been immortalized in this dead material, the Antinous that lived and breathed and captured Hadrian's imagination has been long gone. So that's really what this series of drawings is about. And these are all different statues from the Vatican, from the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, from Delphi, from other sites across the Mediterranean that draw him again and again and again. I'm an architect, so I'll always go back to architecture as my first love. This is actually also in Lavrion. It's this absolutely stunning neoclassical house that's completely decayed and falling apart, and even in its advanced state of decay, that there's this certain majesty that it has because it's imbued with principles of architecture, proportion, harmony, rhythm, the golden section. I mean, all of this stuff that has come down from antiquity, and even in this French workers' home that was probably built in the 19th century for some manager of a mining company in Lavrion, it still echoes of this other world and this other time, and I just felt very compelled to draw it. Just to finish up my presentation, I've also been dabbling a little bit in digital imagery. These are all scenes that I've constructed in Rhino, which is a 3D design program that a lot of architects use to create three-dimensional images and renderings. And once I discovered just how powerful Rhino is and how you can become very cinematic with it, I started to create these metaphysical scenes that are very much informed by Plato and the forms and sacred geometries, but doing them in a way where they look like highly rendered paintings from the 19th century, even though they're kind of abstract and very contemporary looking. And these are all variations on a theme. This one, for example, the architect's dream. Lou, architects are always trying to make things float in the air without any visible structural support. Well, I can at least do it in Rhino if I can't do it in reality. And, themes about antiquity, about the sacredness of places, the idea of the temenos, which is a very Greek idea and a very beautiful idea. And, more imagery like that. I'm continuing to draw. I'm actually beginning to expand out into different series of drawings that I could go into, but that is my work in a nutshell. So thank you for letting me share that with you.
John, thank you for that. And as we know, you're known as the Renaissance man. And when I think of your work, and I think of you because you come from a world where architects learned how to draw. Okay?
Right. Yeah,
versus
it is about drawing,
versus using computers. So you developed that talent from a very early age. And again, when I think of you, I think of someone from another century, quite frankly, exploring the ancient world and sitting there with a sketchbook, sketching out all these monuments. Thank you for being with us today and joining this excellent group. By the way, excellent group. John, of course, is coming from the United States. A lot of our participants are coming from Hellas, or the Hellenic Republic, as many people know, because I even changed some of your resumes, which have the word Greece. Everyone knows I don't care for the word Greece, Greek, etc. I prefer Hellenic. I prefer Hellas, Hellenic Republic, etc. Our next presenter and artist is an art historian, curator, Anna Chassanakou. She is an art historian with extensive experience in art curating and design of cultural and art history programs. She collaborates with art foundations, with galleries, educational and cultural centers, as well as independent artists and art professionals. She's the owner of Art Forward Curate Art Firm. She has her own blog. And she's a consultant partner at La Boutique Fine Art and a tutor and head of art, culture, and communications in Lexo Logos Center in Athens, in the Hellenic Republic. Sorry, I don't use the word Greece. She has a BA in archaeology and art history, and an MA in cultural education, and further specialization in art curating, exhibition design, and art management. Thank you for joining us, Anna, today and being with this fantastic group.
Thank you for having me, Lou, and it was such a pleasure to meet everyone, and of course to see Agni, and thank you, Agni, for introducing me to this amazing group. Okay, I'm going to start by saying that my contribution here is going to be a little bit unorthodox in terms of order, because I'm an art historian, so my approach will be a little bit historical and theoretical, which means everybody that everyone said here could come after. So I'm going to take you a little bit back. It's past time in Greece, so I will give you the nicest fairy tale to go to sleep for the ones being in Athens or Greece generally. So to start with, I'm going to stand a little bit more literally in today's topic, and bring in discussion the idea and the term of Hellenicity, την ελληνικότητα, as we would say in Greek, in Hellenic language. I'm going to use my own, give me a second to share my screen. That should be okay. So I guess now you can see my screen. Okay. So the term Hellenicity in art is very much related to this very first beginning of the Greek state. It is related to the national liberation struggle and to this historical need to shape the cultural and educational model of the newly established Greek state. Over the course of the Greek history of art, Hellenicity as the element of Greek identity, basically, of the national, collective, consciousness, or the aesthetics, it becomes a constant quest. Starting with the first period of the new state, we have this gaze of Greece to the Western world, to the European model. You know, we talked about Otto being in Greece. So many Greek artists were studying in the Royal Academy of Fine Arts in Munich. So what they were actually bringing back and representing is known as academic painting, is something that aimed to modernize and westernize the Greek society. So it was very far from what we could call a Greek identity, a Hellenic identity. Some paintings of the time were basically historical paintings and portraiture of the bourgeois of the time. And the period where Hellenicity as a term is very much heard is the period of the 30s. I'm going to go forward a little bit to save some time to all of us. So it basically starts with Parthenis on the beginning of the century, and continues with the 30s generation as we know them. It's always good to see the socio-political and historical context when we talk about meanings like terms like that. We are in the beginning of the century. We are at the time that in the Europe, we have all these modern movements that slowly the Greeks are coming across to. And we have the period is marked by the event of the Asia Minor catastrophe, which basically traumatized the Greek society. So although the artists are looking in Europe, at the same time, they're trying to make a shift and try to look again in their own cultural past, which has a very strong artistic identity. And this is the post-Byzantine one. So Parthenis, these are artists that we all more or less know. I don't know about our audience, but for the artists, I'm sure. And representatives of this period are names like Kondoglou or Tsarouchis, Egonopoulos, Hadjikyriakos Gikas. So for Kondoglou, who was the teacher and the master of the post-Byzantine art, he really influenced the generation of the 30s, the artists after him. Tsarouchis was one of him. I was thinking when John Fotiadis was showing his drawing about the neoclassical buildings that it reminded me of the word of Tsarouchis, because I live in Castella, you know, and we have many buildings like that which are ready to collapse, and most of them we know them by Tsarouchis depictions, and we are very happy to have this legacy because we wouldn't know how our cities would look back then. So maybe, John, you should come from Piraeus sometime to draw the buildings here.
I would love to. In fact,
they're still standing. They're still standing, by the way, but I don't know for how long. So I'm going to continue. Of course, his very famous sailors. We can see still the visual language of Tsarouchis is very close to the Byzantine legacy of his. I'm going to take you very quickly to this journey, because the purpose of this presentation would be to research and start identifying the different forms of Hellenicity in the contemporary era on artists like you in the contemporary artistic production. So in the post-war art, the references to the Greek tradition are becoming to get more restrained. Now the look is very much to the West, to Europe, and to US, slowly. Movements like anti-realism, expressionism, cubism, and eventually abstraction are affecting the Greek artists, but they still try to keep their soul, their Greek, their Hellenic soul alive. For example, we have here works by Ioannis Stathoyiannis. Everyone can identify the Greek landscape, the Greek summer images, or the still lives, but with a very expressionistic style. So the shift to Europe is very obvious here. Or Yanis Morales' work, who's a very prominent artist, and his latest works are very close to cubism and abstraction eventually. Okay, yeah, we're at the time where in USA, well, the Americans love abstraction. We're at the time that in the US, the abstract expressionism is very high. It's the top trend. So I'm going to make a very small break here because we are reaching the 60s, 70s decade. We explore the Hellenicity in the different Greek art historical movements. This is the dictatorship period. And art and Hellenicity takes a very different meaning. It becomes a protest. It becomes completely politicized, and it serves a very specific goal. And this is the liberation, this is democracy, this is the human and political rights, works by Kaniaris or Malamos, Kaniaris again, the Koulakos, Raitis. Who doesn't know Raitis with this motif, this invention of his little man that he did, to reach around the 60s, 70s, another very big and interesting group of artists, the Greek avant-garde, as they are called, and this is the Greek diaspora. Well, we would need many, many hours to talk about these artists, so generally I had to make everything very short, as a short story from the beginning of the Greek state until today. With the Greek diaspora, what happens is that we have two cases. One is that artists now want to expand their limits. They want to travel, as John said, they want to meet cultures, they want to interact with the artists abroad, they want to see the different artistic trends and movements and be part of them. So their look is definitely abroad. On the other hand, after and during the dictatorship, there were artists that they had to migrate, they had to leave due to the political circumstances that they were facing in their own country. Here I will just remind, if I may, this very famous story about the Mataroa ship that left. This is an older story, 1945, with many Greek artists and intellectuals and scientists, also young ones, under scholarship by the French government. So there is a migration wave started from the 45, 50s until the 70s. And cities like Paris or Berlin or London or Rome and New York, of course, becomes their city that is welcoming and hosting these artists. And this is the Greek avant-garde. I cannot possibly mention everybody, so I just made a selection of artists that basically became very famous in the US and especially New York. The first is the very prominent, the well-known Chrissa Vardea, aka Chrissa. The reason I selected to speak about Chrissa is not just her appeal in the world, but also because she's a woman, and women in art are like less showcased than men. So Chrissa was a very exquisite case. She found an amazing way of implementing her Greek past, like the ancient Greek legacy, the Byzantine art, this minimalistic aesthetics that we see in her experimental neon sculptures and installations. Basically, she was inspired by all these neon signs in Manhattan and Times Square, and she made monumental works. Here we can see a series of works called Cycladic books. I think the reference is obvious. I don't need to say anything about that, sorry. And some of the works related to Times Square. She was using ideograms and symbols in her works. She was very interested in this visual language that she could really communicate through symbols. Of course, it's the time of the expansion of the mass media as well. This is a work, monumental work by Chrysssa that we have in Athens, in the Athens Metro Evangelismos station. If you visit Athens, I'm sure you have seen it. And this is one of my favorite. This is like, it reflects her minimalistic aesthetic and her love in the female form. This is Clytemnestra. It's a sculpture that is in front of the Athens Concert Hall, here in Athens again. Next artist is Takis Panagiotis Vasilakis, but known as Takis, and a pioneer of the kinetic art. So here, I'm just trying to show that apart from the Hellenic aspect or the Hellenic character of these people's work, they were really innovators. They were pioneers in their field. So Takis managed to create a link between art and science. He combined elements of nature and physics, creating these kinetic sculptures. He was among the artists that moved to Paris, and he stayed there for a very long time. At some point in 1968, he goes to the US, to Massachusetts, as a scholarship by the MIT for the Center of the Advanced Visual Studies. So there he creates a series of electromagnetic sculptures. And Takis was a radical personality. Maybe one thing that is worth to mention is that he barged into the Museum of Modern Art in order to withdraw his work before the museum security even noticed or reacted. And this was a symbolic action from his side that eventually got him in the headlines of the New York Times. Another work by Takis. His Parisian period, he made this series of erotic sculptures. They are quite different than the American ones. This is an example of them. I mean, the reference to the Greek, to his Greek origin, to his Greek identity and legacy here is very obvious. It looks like fragments of maybe the Parthenon or something like that. Definitely related to his ancient references. Stephen Adonakos, another Greek that moved to New York. And Adonakos is selected because he is considered the master of neon art. Very prominent himself. He presented his works in hundreds of galleries and museums in New York and internationally after. What he does, it's more obvious here, he uses complete or incomplete geometric neon forms that range from 3D, three-dimensional indoor installations to painted canvases, as you can see here. It's what today we know as backlit panels, the light boxes, as we know them in contemporary art. Colored pencil drawings on paper and vellum has been his practice since 1950. Here is a colored pencil and vellum. And I'm going to finish this tribute with Theodoros Stamos. Theodoros Stamos is one of the youngest abstract expressionists in the American art scene. He's the one that maybe you could identify his Greek past less than the others because he was really into the abstraction of the time. He was friends with Mark Rothko, Jackson Pollock, de Kooning, and he was among the 8 influential New York painters. His work was very spiritual. You can see here. Oops. And he was very consistent to this approach throughout his whole career. So after seeing this most recent diaspora artists, I'm really wondering recently, and Lou mentioned this very lively art scenes, contemporary art scenes in this urban environments of Athens, Thessaloniki, New York. It's the truth that you can sense that there is an explosion of art production. And to me, as I'm a theoretician, I mean, I don't produce artistic work, but I'm an observer, and I like to see and observe what is the link of these artists to their past, if there is any, and what is the Hellenicity, η ελληνικότητα, that everyone carries in their works today. I could choose artists like you to present as case studies, as examples. There are numerous. Fortunately, I'm happy to see that all this globalization, even in Athens, you know, we are such a multicultural city now. It's a very global environment. We had all these years of crisis. There's an expansion of tourism, an expansion of migration, and the cities are changing. Lou couldn't describe it better in his intro. The cities are changing in a good way, but also in a bad way. And for sure, we are creating new social circumstances that affect the young artists' works. And therefore, it's very interesting to see that many of them make this shift and turn to their Greek past as a reference of their childhood, as a reference of their studies and readings. But you can start identifying a Hellenic identity in artists that are really innovative, up and coming. They have international careers, so they have a great appeal right now. So I choose some of them. As I said, I could choose many. I choose 3 artists just because they're very different with one another in terms of their media and their visual language. So we are in search of identity today. And I'm going to start with the work of Alexandros Maganiotis, because this is actually the title of his work, his series that refer to the Homeric work, the Odyssey. Maganiotis creates a universe which is paradoxical and enigmatic. He uses acrylic ink drawings, and through those, he's trying to connect the history and the collective memory to the modern life, to the urban life. This is a work of this series called Nobody, as a link to Ulysses, to Odysseus. And in his works, we can observe fragments of symbols, of words, of images, associations, archetypes. It's a very pluralistic work. It's basically a whole narration behind it. A game of metaphors that compose at the end a new mythology the references to the Greek mythology, to the Greek language, to the Greek literature are very obvious through this work. So Maganiotis, here is another one, is actually, he demonstrates a Hellenicity as his starting point in an adventurous quest of his own personal identity within this environment that he lives in. We can observe some symbols here. This is Athena, the statue of Athena, but still we have symbols of the German Volkswagen and Mercedes. We can all understand the narrative behind this. I'm reminding you again that for the people that live in Athens, the crisis and then the COVID and then the migration issue had really affected their lives. And this is very obvious in the works of art now. These are some other works of him in the same concept. And I'm going to pass to another artist, mid-established artist, Misha Kataoui. He's born in Switzerland, but Greek Egyptian parents. So he's actually an artist that is has a more cosmopolitan view of things. He travels, he lives abroad, he returns to Greece. What Misha is doing, and is actually interesting to me, and it's the reason I selected him, is that he's using again the same legacy, the same heritage, but this time he wants to create a socio-political commentary. And he's using irony and sarcasm, something that is part of the Greek DNA. We have examples of works like an X-ray of the Greek flag wounded, or the butchery of antiquities. These are sculptures. He's a sculptor, by the way, as a statement for the steal of our ancient heritage, until his recent series of prominent figures, heroes, gods, philosophers, that he's using to, as I said, commentary and create a conversation with the viewer about our times. And I'm going to close this with the most young of all. This is a very up-and-coming artist. This is a street artist. It's a trend that has risen through the crisis. Cacao Rocks is his name. Cacao Rocks is a case of a very rapidly up-and-coming artist. He became very well known very quickly. He's the kind of young artist that everybody wants to showcase his work. He's having big collaborations with brands like Metaxa, or I met him in Mykonos, by the way, where I was working for Skoufa Gallery for many years. And I was very impressed by his work because he has invented these 3-color palettes. He has made it sort of his trademark. So he's very recognizable through it. And although he's a street artist and a graffiti artist, his work is inspired by his very personal imagery of Greece, his childhood.
Anna, not to interrupt, can we come to a conclusion? I'd like to have a panel discussion if we can.
Yes. I'm finishing. This is the last thing to say. So I'm going to close by saying that all these artists represent the art of their time. and we can see very, very different aspects of what I brought as a term, the Hellenicity in the Greek contemporary art. This is it by me. You can continue. Thank you very much for your time and patience.
Thank you, Anna, for that presentation, because it did discuss various aspects, not only obviously the ancient, but also the Byzantine. As most of us know, and I like the fact that you started the way you did, because quite frankly, what they did post Hellenic Revolution is really create a scene where everyone thinks of Hellenism as being just ancient. In other words, they don't discuss the continuity of a culture that's been around for thousands of years. As a matter of fact, many people put it in their heads and just talk about ancient culture, eliminating that history that's taken place. I will make a couple of comments. For example, Stamos was a very well-known, pronounced artist whose work was tremendous in terms of the financial aspect, and because of the Rothko case, the Rothko case,
yes,
his work fell tremendously in terms of value. I will say that people like Takis was excellent at promoting himself, because obviously if you go into the museum and you do your scenario, you become well known, and a lot of the young people are into those type of gimmicks. Quite frankly, what I call gimmicks. But once the world finds out about you, everybody wants to know you. We started off with a title of this particular work, which has to do with Hellenism and art, and I think we actually saw it. We actually saw it in the presentations of the artists that we have with us. Obviously, the pond derivation and its etymology was, of course, for the Hellenic Ocean, which came from the British, who initially, referred to any sea as a pond, by the way. And it was only later in the 17th century specifically that it became the Atlantic. In a way, the Atlantic is metaphorical, particularly, and nothing but a pond, actually, among Hellenes, both in Hellas and the American Northeast, since the connection of the communities includes the art communities that are very close. And with that bridge between those communities being Hellenism, a powerful, internationally recognized soft power, having a powerful ability to attract others from around the world. You mentioned, what was mentioned was the Odyssey, and Agni, when the Odyssey was mentioned, I thought of some of your works. If you can, just discuss some of the things that you're doing regarding the Odyssey.
Well, I think because also I've always felt connected to the Odyssey, and probably because my parents are immigrants. I'm born in Australia, got to New York when I'm before 4, went to Greece, back and forth. So I've been on this space of not having a physical home necessarily or belonging anywhere. So that's part of it. And in the sense, I've been always so curious and really in need of establishing within the self. So to me, the Odyssey has always been about finding the self. And I think it's the most it's the basis of Western philosophy, really, or establishing in this way of the ego, of youth, fighting to find its way, conquering, and then going back to home and almost seeing home, and something happens and boom, the illusion goes back into the treachery of the waters and so on. So for me, I've visited that subject many, many times throughout 3 decades, really. And of late, and with COVID, as I was stuck in the middle of Manhattan, really thinking about what is home and what is the self, it got reestablished. And those paintings that I showed, some of the first images of these orbs, which is really the representation of the self within the consciousness, and what is consciousness other than the environment. is continuing in a physical project that I want to do and site specific in Greece that visits some of the ancient spaces that I've never even been to really, because I'm not really, although I'm really in philosophy, I'm deeply Greek, but I don't know really much about Greece other than my own roots, which are Castorian and islands. So I'm interested in examining my roots very much so in that content, but I am a global citizen and I don't really belong to any space. So it's like, how do I carry myself other than occupy this space that I'm in, wherever that is? And that is the ultimate odyssey for me.
Thank you. Nico, a lot of your work has to do not only with youth, but also I saw more contemporary things of older people. What drove you to start looking at youths under different scenarios and show that as art, which I think is fantastic, by the way.
Where is it?
Is Nico with us? Is Nico with us?
No, he's not.
Okay, is Yanya with us?
Yes.
Yanya, going to your work, okay, what has fascinated me is because talking about the word odyssey, I mean, you've had your own odyssey. And one of the things, and I've been to China many times, by the way, and one of the things that I thought was amazing was that when I was in Xi'an, the ancient capital, and I was walking through a museum, and then from about 100 feet, maybe 100 feet away, I spotted an object that to me was Hellenic. I said to myself, "This is amazing. This looks like a work of art from the I hate the word also Byzantine, but I'll use that word anyway, from the Byzantine period, what we call the East Roman period." And it was, in fact, the most prized object in the Chinese museum, and that in that particular museum in Xi'an, and that was, in fact, from the Byzantine period. The other thing that was fascinating to me was which I visited also, was the terracotta warriors. And the terracotta warriors, one of the things that has been discussed is ancient Hellenic artisans who went to China and actually worked with the Chinese to create the terracotta warriors. Tell me about your fascination with China and the Hellenic link.
Well, it started off when I was a lecturer there, that by accident, really, I'm a heavy smoker, and the cigarette, it was the symbol of meander, a Chinese cigarette that they offered me. So I was actually starting to say to my students how important is Greece, and that the Greek symbol, the Greek key. And they stopped me and they said, "This is not a Greek symbol, it's a Chinese symbol." And I was questioning myself, like something that I knew for many years, how it could be a Chinese symbol. So I started to do this book that led me to a lot of connection between Greece and China. So therefore, I continue with a PhD that it has to do with something that is very Chinese, which is Monkey King, something really mythological. But it has, when I start looking in depth more into it, I saw that it has the stories, it has similarities with Ulysses, and like he was so strong like Achilles. So discovering further that the one that I was analyzing before in the case Mongao, it seems that Christianity and most likely in Nestorianism influenced quite a lot the Chinese between the dynasties between the 6th and the 8th century, and gave a lot of influences and things that later on the Chinese used it.
Well, both cultures obviously were ancient cultures, and a lot is not known in terms of how they interlink with each other. Okay, how they interlink with each other. So I find your work, very fascinating, quite frankly, and I encourage you to continue to go really into the depth of it and really pull out those ancient Hellenic and ancient Chinese similarities. One of the things that I think is also interesting is some of the work that's being done by other artists, including, for example, a good friend, Masaki Noda, who's a Japanese-American artist who's in fact done work in Greece, or in Hellas, as I like to say, and around also in Delphi. He's done work. He's done obviously work relating to Lafcadio Hearn in particular, has had three sculptures, I think, that were in various parts of the Hellenic Republic. And now he's working on a connection between the ancient Hellenic sun god, Ilios, and the Japanese sun god. So I encourage everyone to do this multi-ethnic, multicultural integration of Hellenic arts. John, one thing that fascinates me about you is talking about Hellenism. I mean, you're really into Hellenism, and as you know, we have done a panel discussion relating to bringing back the Acropolis marbles back to Hellas. Okay, we're going to be doing a lot of that in the near future here in New York, where we're going to bring the original castings that were cast from those original marbles in London that are in New York, which will be transported back to City College. John, you are the embodiment, man, of many ways of Hellenism, as all of you are, by the way. Tell us a little bit about that love of Hellas that you have.
Well, they do call me Mr. Greece. I'm only kidding.
What do they call you?
Mr. Greece. That was a bodybuilding competition.
No, you got to call you Mr. Helene. Mr.
That's
Helene.
right. Sorry. Yeah. That's why you never heard of that. Well, what can where do you begin with this story? I mean, it's the story of my life. It's the story, it's the earliest memories I have of anything are walking outside my grandmother's front door in Athens, turning my head and seeing the Acropolis. I mean, it doesn't get more basic than that. And that was probably, despite it occurring very early in my life, maybe I was 5 or 6 years old, it was like Saul on the way to Tarsus. I was bowled over when I saw this building. What I was to learn later was a building. To me, it was just this glowing, ethereal form that seemed to float over the rest of the city. And it struck me as very old and very profound, very important. When I found out that it was man-made, and then I found out that my ancestors had made it, well, that kind of set the tone for, I think, the rest of my life. Becoming an architect was a direct result of that, and my further explorations into art and creativity and philosophy, all of those things, they all go back to that one moment of revelation. And I think that everything that I've done creatively since then is in a very Hellenic tradition, to borrow your term, which is an endless quest for truth and beauty. And I think those two things are completely intertwined. They're one and the same in my mind.
Well, not only that, Hellenism is international, as we know. Okay, Hellenism is not just about Hellenes, but it affects all people, by the way, around the world, and that's part of the reason why we wanted to discuss this particular topic. Anna, you had mentioned something that stuck out and that I find very real. You mentioned one female Hellenic artist, but in fact, you mentioned that women in art, okay, is a problematic scenario in many ways, and in fact, they are discounted. In other words, men are elevated, to do these different things, but women who have profound art, and some of them are coming up, by the way. Some past females are coming up basically as being fantastic artists, including during the Renaissance period, etc., that we've heard about. But why in your mind, and again, you don't have to speak long on it, why in your mind are women are not recognized the way they should be in the art world?
I think it's not just the art world, it's the sciences world. It's because history is written by man. It's something that everybody knows and everybody acknowledges. And the more we talk about them and we highlight them and we showcase them, they will find their place in the global world that they belong to. I mean, Agni is one case, or Chrisa, or anybody else. Even in this panel, you see we're just two female. This is always the case. It doesn't mean anything. It's something that we can change because the world is changing.
Well, it's something obviously that we should work on, because when we talk,
I think it would be a nice topic,
when
Lou.
you mention the history of art, most of the people you mentioned were basically men. We're going to wrap it up now. So if we can, one by one, just some final words. We'll start with Agni, just some final words.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, just some final words, for the evening.
For the evening, I would say my only words for life is keep creative, be mindfulness, and create the world you want. And aesthetics and truth, like John said before, are the fundamental truth for being in my eyes. And I wish that for everybody, because it just makes for a better life.
Thank you, Agni. Nico? Well, Nico's not with us. Yanni?
Yes, I have to stress two things. First of all, it was a pleasure for me to be with you, and I would like to invite the Greek American artists to come more often to Greece. And I am in the island of Crete, so as Agni said that she would like to exhibit here, she's more than welcome, and I can bring the artist in touch with the city to do something here. It's very important to have like these connections, and also would love to have a presence in the United States, because I didn't have with my artwork yet, so I would like to do something. And what you missed, Lou, before, I was saying that I would like to have a synthesis of my 200 pillows, which is my capture of my life in these different cultures, from China to Greece or United States or elsewhere, to a colorful patch for life. So yes, I would carry on my academics that I have to do, but also as an artist, I do have the desire to have a better presence with my artwork.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying is correct. This collaboration, and part of the reason why we're doing this also is for people to speak to each other, because we're all from the same DNA, okay? And the collaboration between Hellenic American artists in the U.S. going to Hellas and Hellenic artists coming into the United States is very important, quite frankly, for among us to elevate our art within the world, because we certainly have a lot to offer. John, or Yanni, another Yanni, some final thoughts?
Look, thank you again for including me. This is a really interesting discussion. It's particularly fascinating to see what other people are doing and how they're approaching this cultural legacy that we all share. The only thing I would stress is that I feel incredibly fortunate to have been born into this culture, because the more I've learned about it, and a lot of it has been self-learning, the more I realize that a lot of thinking and exploration went on thousands of years ago, and it really helped to cast a die that was really going to influence the world moving forward. And I think it's really valuable, as we propel into this age of technology and information, and things are moving at lightning speed. One shouldn't forget what those philosophers and craftsmen and kalitechnis from antiquity saw regarding their world. I think there are universal lessons there that are applicable today, and I'm certainly trying to apply them. So thank you.
John, thank you. Thank you so much for being with us. Some final thoughts, Anna?
Yeah, I would like add on what Yanni said, that the Hellenic is a global language. The Hellenic is a global visual language, is a diversified language. It concerns the whole world, the whole globe. And despite all and against all odds, I think people should be creative. They should seek for these principles of the Hellenic legacy. Finally, maybe art can save us at the end.
Listen, all I know is this has been a fascinating discussion across the pond. There's a tremendous, and I feel it, by the way, I feel a tremendous energy by our artists, not only in Hellas, okay, but also in America, and that Hellenic energy is something that we have to project into our societies, and we have to elevate. We have to elevate our Hellenic artists, both in Hellas and here in the United States. And again, Yanni, we were talking about a collaboration, and I think it's tremendously important for us to continue to collaborate and to expose our great artists to everyone around us. With that, I'd like to say to the audience, I'm sorry?
Mr. Katsos, just say something very little, because what we missed before, I was saying for an exhibition that will bring together students from diaspora in an artistic dialogue based on Hebrew art.
Oh,
so
yes,
I'd like
yes,
that
yes.
to discuss it further if it's possible. Sorry for the
I'd love to
interruption.
do that, and you know, to the extent that Agni also has her non-for-profit, quite frankly, which has affected thousands of young people, not only in the United States but also in India and other countries. I'd like to make the conversation also international in a way, if we can do that. For the audience, and thank you, Yanni, for that. For the audience, I'd like to say that those who are interested in our programs, certainly you can keep tabs on us on www.embca.com, and all our panel discussions are on YouTube, and in YouTube it's under EMBCA. With that, I'd like to finish with our great musical artist, Spiro, who's going to close out this event with another piece. Spiro, if you can, unmute yourself. If you can, unmute yourself, and also describe the piece you're going to play. Is Spiro muted?
It's Spiros Balos. It's one of my compositions in the upcoming CD album, my Hellenic music. And speaking about Hellenicity and Hellenikota, this is the main ingredient for me. In all our artistic work, when we say we are Hellenes, we have to show that ingredient. And let the music speak about that.
Hold it, before you start the music. Hold it, hold it, Spiro. Spiro, before you start the music. Yeah, he started the music. what a great, Spiro and everybody and all the panelists. What a great panel discussion we had today. And Spiro, hold it. Spiro,
Okay.
as you know, and I've said this more than once, we are going to do an art and music presentation here in New York.
Event.
And
Yeah.
quite frankly, after listening to all this, I want to do the same thing, music and art in the same venue where they see art and they listen to music, also in Hellas. So we are going to plan it in New York. You know, we talked about it for the springtime, which we will do. And let's coordinate with some of you here and let's do the same thing in Hellas, where we have an art exhibition and at the same time, we follow through with a musical presentation to bring Hellenism, both in a musical form of art and in the,
Yes,
in the
yes.
physical.
Listen, Lou, you spoke about multicultural integration. This very song, I have envisioned it, playing it in Hellas at a big place, whatever that is, with instrumentalists from all over the world playing it. So, I don't know, maybe it's gonna be realized, but the most important thing is for us, Hellenes from Hellas and from USA and from wherever we are, to get together and,
Yes.
and collaborate.
Yes, and Spiro, when you do your musical presentation in a large venue in Hellas, we want also an art presentation.
Of course, why not? Yes, yes.
Anyway, thank you all for being with us. Great panelists, great topic. We're going to do it again in the near future, and we're going to do it also physically,
Yes.
where we can play music and show art both in the two sides of the pond, in the U.S.
Okay.
and in Hellas. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Lou.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
everyone.
much.
Everybody, thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye from
Thank you,
Greece.
guys.
Bye.
Bye from Greece.
Bye-bye now.